Hello, everybody. I want to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes explaining the Galileo strategy from the Josh Bersin Company in the context of the AI transformations that are going on in virtually every organization everywhere in the world. So, to start just with a simple concept, essentially what's going on in all aspects of business, sales, marketing, finance, IT, supply chain, customer service, healthcare, every industry is the use of AI, the adoption of AI, the development of AI to create what we call the superworker company. The superworker company is the company that can use AI to leverage and improve the capabilities and expertise of its people to drive growth at a more linear scale than their competitors. There's hundreds of examples of this. AI being used for customers, AI being used for service, AI being used for training, AI being used for recruiting. And within HR, of course, most of you know, there are hundreds of use cases where we can improve the operations of HR, generate much better data about our workforce to make much faster and more accurate decisions about who to hire, who to promote, how to develop people, how to pay people well, how to schedule shifts, how to improve operational performance, how to make people happier, et cetera, that don't just improve the productivity of the people, in other words, the revenue per employee, but improve the scale of the whole company itself to grow at a faster rate because we have a more integrated set of data and intelligence in our company. And by the way, as I've talked about many times, this is going to break down all the walls between different functional areas in HR and in the company itself. So let me talk about Galileo. So what we did over the last 2.5, 3 years, it's been about 3 years, is we took the research and the advisory services and the benchmarking and the data and the case studies and the vendor analysis we've done for a long time, and we put it into an AI agent. And what we discovered when we did this was that as a tool for HR initially, and that's where we're positioning it today, although we're quickly moving beyond HR, this system, because it is trained and supported with 30 plus years of research on human capital, skills, benchmarks, data about pay, data about leadership, et cetera, maturity models, and the vendor market is extremely useful for hundreds of use cases. Use cases in recruiting, in assessment, in skills analysis, in sourcing, in pay equity analysis, in employee relations, in development planning and performance management, on and on and on. And we discovered this, in a sense, because of the power of AI to take this massive corpus of data. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of pages of information and make sense of it all in an integrated way. And the reason we know that this is possible is because that's what we do as humans. What we do as humans for you as clients is we talk to you on the phone and we have workshops with you and we help you get through these complicated issues that you face in the human capital area because we've done so much research over so many years. And so in some ways, Galileo is the combined intelligence of every analyst we've ever hired, including me, brought together in a very, very easy to use way that you can talk to, ask it questions, it will prompt you, it will coach you, and so forth. So we launched that 2 years ago, and it turns out it's extremely powerful. As a matter of fact, if you look at what's in there, and I won't read you this chart, but you can look at it, we have more than 3,500 companies using it of different shapes of sizes. Some are using it for they're using it for many, many different things. We can't tell you all the things they're doing with it, but its capabilities have become more and more and more advanced over time. Now, we're not a software company. We don't build the platform. We work with a company in Sweden called Sana Labs, which is a magnificent company. We're very, very close friends with them. And they're building more and more advanced features all the time. The Galileo platform uses the technologies of OpenAI, of Anthropic, of Google, of other tools, and it manipulates the data that we give it and decides on its own, using its own router, which LLM or models to use for different kinds of questions. But you don't have to know any of that because it just does that without you even understanding it. And it gives you all of these capabilities right out of the box. And as you can see on the left column, we decided, because we don't know everything about HR, that we would bring trusted content providers into Galileo. So when you buy Galileo for a very low cost, you're getting millions of dollars of data at your fingertips that would be very hard for you to acquire on your own. And I won't read you all the things on the left, but you can read through the Galileo documentation and see what's coming. And we're continuing to add more data to this. But it goes much further. Over the last 2.5, 3 years, we've experienced your life and we know what you're trying to do. You're trying to buy things and standardize on things that give you an AI platform for business transformation. And there's lots of vendors and there's lots of options. There's the Microsoft Copilot, there's the tools from Google, there's OpenAI, there's the new AI features in SuccessFactors and SAP, including Joule. There's the new AI features in Workday. There's the new AI features in your recruiting tools. There's Eightfold, on and on and on. And what we've learned is that for Galileo to be a good and standard and scalable platform for transformation, we needed to do more. So let me talk you through the roadmap of where we've been. The original product, Galileo, launched in May of 2024, which is, just a little more than a year ago, was immediately a success, and we had thousands of people start using it. Soon after that, we announced a major upgrade called the Mercury release that added reasoning models so that Galileo can literally reason answers to questions and coach you. One of the things Galileo can do now is it can ask you questions about your problems and assess you against our maturity models without you having to ask it questions. It now has salary data for sourcing and benchmarking. We added the universal competency framework and other leadership models from SHL, and it can schedule meetings for you and record meetings and store them in your local corpus. And one of the things that's cool about Galileo is it's basically a personal database. So everything that you put in your version of Galileo as an individual or as a team makes your version of Galileo your system. One of our clients is the IATA, the Industry Association for the Airline Industry, and they have basically used Galileo to crowdsource data from Boeing, Airbus, and a whole bunch of other sources to build the entire skills architecture for all the major roles in the airline industry for the next 5 years, and then analyze it by geography to create this really fascinating report, which basically is a model, an AI model, so airlines can now assess their skills and their jobs against the IATA view of the future. That's the kind of thing you can do. But we did find, as we talked to many of you, that you have other tools. You have the Microsoft Copilot. You have the AI tools from ServiceNow. You have Joule from SAP. You're using the Workday Assistant. Or if you're a smaller company working in the mid-market product, you might have an AI assistant from ADP or HiBob or another one. So we created a version of Galileo that's transportable that we call Galileo Inside. And what we basically can do is we now have Galileo running in the Microsoft Copilot at Microsoft. It'll be announced and available later this year. We have Galileo running in SAP, in Joule. That'll also be announced later this year. We have Galileo running in and with HiBob, which will be available to HiBob customers very quickly. And we're working on the same thing with Workday, so that regardless of the infrastructure you decide that you have, Galileo's intelligence will be with you. And I think the way companies are going to work is different parts of the company are going to have different agents. You're going to have specialized agents that might be used, in IT, specialized agents that might be used in sales. Some of them might be standardized on Microsoft, but some may not. And so what we're able to do is take this human capital intelligence and move it into the platforms of your choice. And so those of you that are using some of the other platforms, just contact us and we'll show you how to deploy Galileo into these other environments. And by the way, this goes further because the prompt libraries and the intelligence that we've built into Galileo will manifest itself in different ways in these different systems. If you have a call center, for example, and a whole bunch of people dealing with cases and relatively repeatable problems that they're hearing, and they're using the ServiceNow agent for case management and knowledge management, Galileo makes every one of those agents more intelligent as they ask questions about human capital or HR or leadership or management issues. And by the way, one of the things that's also come out in the Venus version, it will be formally announced, but it's available now, is something we called Galileo for Managers. Because what we found is that many of the HR use cases where we're automating the work of a business partner or a recruiter or an HR generalist, the HR person said, well, why don't I just give the manager access to Galileo themselves, because Galileo has all our information in it, and they can ask Galileo the questions instead of asking me the questions, and then I can help them in the more strategic issues. So Galileo for Managers is now available, and it'll be formally launched later in July with a lot of new things coming to turn Galileo into a management coach, a management assistant, and a management trainer to give you leadership development and supervisory support for all of the leaders and managers in your company. And by the way, everybody's a leader. So in some sense, it's something that everybody can use. And in the middle of that, this May and June, we launched Galileo Learn. I'll explain what that is in a minute, but basically, we believe there's going to be a two-tier architecture to these AI systems where there'll be agents being used by individuals in the company for various business uses, but then there will be a server component that will provide shared knowledge, shared assets, shared prompts, shared data that can be shared across the company. And you could view the agents as intelligent clients or intelligent systems that share this data between each other, but it's more likely that you're going to have centralized systems. And Galileo Learn is basically a dynamic content system for learning. And what we've done in Galileo Learn over the last 6 months is we took all of the training we developed in the Josh Bersin Academy and we converted it into AI format. So we now have 700 courses out of the box on various aspects of management and learning and HR and recruiting and pay, DEI, on and on and on. And people can take those courses, they can talk to the tutor, they can get coached by the tutor in Galileo Learn, and the Galileo agent can manifest and find and execute and view those courses from the agent. So if you're using the Galileo agent, you can access all the data in Galileo Learn. And let me show you what that means. So if you think about all of these different manifestations, I would call them, of the Galileo intelligence, here's the way it's going to work. So let's look at an HR department. So typically in an HR department, you're sort of set up something like this. You have an L&D group in the lower left. You have various centers of excellence in the lower center for talent management, employee relations. Different groups are organized different ways. Maybe there's a COE for employee experience, or a COE for pay, or a COE for low performers. There's a recruiting group at the right that's spending a lot of time on sourcing and assessment and job descriptions and skills assessment and so forth. There are a bunch of business partners that are located in the business on the upper right that are doing either very strategic consulting work, or they're helping with learning and coaching, and they're helping people with their employee relations issues. And then there are service centers in the upper left where you've centralized more standard support for various HR questions around the world that might be local or transactional in nature. And then, of course, underneath this, there's all sorts of technology. Well, the way this works from the standpoint of AI is each of these users are going to have different perhaps implementations of Galileo, depending on the platform, as you can see. And these systems will all work together because Galileo Learn, which is our newest component, where all of your corporate training will reside, because Galileo Learn is basically an LMS in a sense, but really a next generation dynamic system, can support all of these different use cases. So if you have standard HR policies for hiring, standard HR policies for culture, standard HR policies for pay, performance management, all these things that companies do, you can put that information into Galileo Learn in the form of documents or courses, and everybody in HR, and we're only talking about HR on this picture, can access that information through their local agent. And so if they're hiring somebody or dealing with an employee relations problem or building a PIP or perhaps a development plan, and they want to kind of make sure they know how to do it the company way, they're going to have access to all the information in the corporate system, the Galileo Learn at home and the corporate, in their agent experience. And so that's a very, very powerful way for people to localize their needs. And by the way, each of these local users could be writing prompts, developing prompts, sharing prompts, loading local data, their own spreadsheets, their own employee lists, whatever may be working on, to do things on their own. And if you're running a call center or a service center and you have 300 standard questions that people ask, those questions could easily be automated as standard prompts in Galileo with standard answers for your service agent. And that can obviously take place in the other areas as well. And we know what these use cases are because we've been talking to companies about them. We have a report that's a couple of months old with 100 of them, but we now have almost 300 off-the-shelf use cases built out in the task library of Galileo out of the box. And, I have to, sort of imagine that of the 3,000 or 4,000 people that are using it, that there's many, many more, because we're getting 7,000 to 8,000 to 9,000 queries a week from people using Galileo for different things. We don't look at everything they're doing, but we get a general sense of it. And so you can decide as a local HR team leader or local HR manager or a COE leader how to implement this technology to automate the things that are the most common in your area. And these are very sophisticated applications. Just to give you another example, I was at a meeting in the Middle East a couple of months ago with a large chemical company, actually an oil and gas and energy company, and the engineering leader said, we want to assess the skills of 100 of our engineers as we move to this new chemical process manufacturing to figure out who's ready to move quickly and who can be developed and what would be the development plan for each of these people. And I asked him, how are you doing that? And he says, well, we're interviewing them, we're giving them assessments, we're looking at their backgrounds. And he said, it's going to take us about a year to do this. I said, well, let me give you, sort of an idea here. What if you took the CVs and backgrounds of all these people, put them into Galileo, take the recordings of all the interviews you've done, put them into Galileo, ask Galileo, give them the Galileo, the skills framework you have of the new skills that you believe are needed for this new chemical process, even though they may not be perfect, give it the language for each skill, and ask Galileo to assess these 100 people against these skills and give you a report of the relative strengths and weaknesses of each individual. By the way, the system will do that. I've done this. Now, it's not perfect. It's not doing a psychological assessment of each individual one step at a time, but out of the box, you can get a high-level development plan and the selection process for that massive problem in a matter of days versus months or years to do it by hand. That's just one very, very simple example, and you can go through all these others. But it goes even further because let's assume you've done this and you've gotten your hands dirty and you're familiar with Galileo, and you say, well, we've got the HR people using it and we're building best practices and we're understanding how to share prompts. But we also want to give it to our leaders, and we want to let our leaders use it as a management and development tool for coaching, for professional development, for decision making, for performance analysis, performance reviews, and so forth. That's what's next. Because now what you can do is you can take all of these use cases and content that you've built in the Galileo infrastructure for HR, and you can now start to leverage it for the rest of the organization. In particular, with Galileo Learn, because Galileo Learn can build content dynamically, not only can the L&D department and corporate build the content that's needed, and the individual users can take courses and customize them dynamically and build profiles, skills profiles dynamically using the system, using AI, but you could add your leadership development content to Galileo Learn, and suddenly you have a scalable leadership development program where every employee in the company will not only get personalized and up-to-date leadership development as needed, but they'll get a tutor, a coach, an AI assistant to help them with leadership issues, and they can go and ask the assistant any question they want on any topic that might come along. I'm in a meeting and somebody was arguing with me about this, that, and the other thing, and I don't know how to deal with it, or I'm doing a skills assessment, or I'm trying to figure out who to promote, or I don't understand how to pay this person, or I'm having a debate about the org structure of our team. Every manager in the company, every supervisor can use Galileo to ask those questions. And so you suddenly have a leadership support, a management support, an enablement tool for your entire organization. And where this eventually goes is these use cases in these local business areas will be localized and put into Galileo just the way you've done it in HR. And you'll end up essentially with a network system of intelligence where different parts of the company in HR or now outside of HR are using the Galileo network or the Galileo platform to deploy their local AI solutions all over the company. That's where we're going. And to tell you, for those of you who know us, we've been studying business and industries and HR and management issues for a long time. This is the first time that I can think of in our career where we are now able to take this intelligence that we so badly want to serve you with and make it available to you to roll out and customize and implement in the business processes and business solutions and the implementations that are unique to your company. Here's a little bit about the roadmap of when all these pieces are coming out. We are so excited to share this with you. You can get access to Galileo and Galileo Learn as a bundle, as an individual, as a team, or as an organization. Please contact us to learn more. We're excited to have you join us on the AI Galileo journey. Thank you.